Some cities hide their secrets underground. But sometimes, a dog can still hear them breathing. Snow swept sideways across the Toronto Police K-9 training yard while blue emergency lights flickered against the frozen pavement like distant lightning. The January wind carried the smell of diesel, wet concrete, and road salt drifting in from the Gardiner Expressway. Officers stood beneath the floodlights with coffee steaming through gloved hands as another tactical drill began. German shepherds barked sharply. Belgian Malinois strained against their harnesses. Every dog reacted the moment the siren echoed through the yard. Every dog except Milo. The black and rust Doberman remained curled near the obstacle ramp, motionless beneath the storm. His breathing was shallow. Uneven. Like a creature too exhausted to wake up anymore. Officer Ethan Calloway watched from the edge of the training grounds with both hands buried deep inside his dark navy winter jacket. Snow collected quietly along the gray in his beard. A younger officer nearby shook his head. He slept through another one. Someone farther back muttered softly, "Dog is finished." Ethan said nothing. He kept watching Milo instead. The Doberman did not look lazy. He looked haunted. Another siren blasted across the yard. This time the speakers added recorded subway vibrations used for urban tactical conditioning. Metal grinding against metal. Deep underground resonance rolling through the concrete. Milo twitched instantly. His ears moved even in sleep. One paw trembled lightly against the icy ground. Ethan's expression changed. He stepped closer through the snow while the other handlers continued the exercise behind him. The closer he got, the stranger the dog looked. Milo's eyes moved beneath closed lids. His breathing quickened every time the low vibration passed through the yard. As if the sound was following him somewhere inside his dreams. Captain Murray approached from behind with a clipboard tucked beneath one arm. Evaluation board meets Saturday morning. Ethan remained crouched beside the Doberman. He is exhausted. He is failing. The wind pushed snow across the pavement between them. Nearby, another K-9 barked aggressively at the drill instructor. Milo did not react to the shouting. Only the vibration beneath the concrete. Ethan slowly rested one gloved hand against the Doberman's neck. Warm. Trembling. Listening. Then it happened again. A faint underground vibration rolled beneath the training yard. Barely noticeable. Most people would have ignored it completely. Milo suddenly released a low growl in his sleep. Not aggressive. Afraid. Ethan looked toward the downtown skyline glowing faintly through the storm beyond the fences of the yard. Somewhere under the city, trains moved beneath kilometers of frozen streets and old tunnels buried beneath Toronto decades ago. Milo's breathing became faster. His paws twitched again. Captain Murray sighed heavily. Calloway, that dog cannot even stay awake through a siren anymore. Ethan stared at the Doberman for several quiet seconds before answering. Snowflakes melted slowly across Milo's dark fur beneath the blue emergency lights. He is not sleeping through the noise, Ethan said softly. He is listening to something underneath it. The snowstorm followed Ethan all the way home. Thick white flakes drifted across the windshield while downtown Toronto disappeared behind a haze of red brake lights and frozen mist rising from the Don Valley Parkway. Milo lay silently in the back of the cruiser cage, not asleep this time, only staring toward the floor beneath him with ears twitching every few seconds. Ethan kept glancing into the rearview mirror. Something about the Doberman felt wrong in a way experience could not explain. Not sick. Not injured. Listening. By the time they reached East York, the streets had gone quiet beneath nearly 15 centimeters of fresh snow. Porch lights glowed softly through the storm while snowplows groaned somewhere in the distance. Ethan parked beside his small brick bungalow and opened the rear cruiser door carefully. Come on, partner. Milo climbed down slowly onto the icy driveway. Then he froze. The Doberman turned immediately toward the south skyline hidden beyond rows of sleeping houses. Downtown Toronto. His breathing tightened. Ethan followed the direction of his stare but saw nothing except snow and distant orange streetlights fading into the storm. You hear it again. Milo did not move. The old officer guided him inside where warm air carried the smell of cedarwood, old coffee, and winter jackets drying near the radiator. Framed K9 photographs lined the hallway walls beside faded commendations from another lifetime. Milo ignored his water bowl completely. Instead he walked straight to the living room window and stood there motionless beneath the moonlit glass. Ethan loosened his dark navy jacket slowly and checked the kitchen clock. 3:16 a.m. The house creaked softly against the wind outside. Then the clock changed. 3:17, instantly Milo's ears lifted straight upward. A faint vibration rolled through the wooden floorboards beneath the house. Barely noticeable. More felt than heard. The glass inside the kitchen cabinet rattled lightly. Milo stepped backward from the window with a low uneasy growl buried deep in his throat. Ethan frowned immediately. Another vibration followed several seconds later. Metallic. Rhythmic. Like distant machinery striking concrete far underground. Milo stared south again. Toward downtown. Toward the buried transit lines stretching beneath the city. Ethan slowly opened the front door and freezing air swept into the house carrying snowflakes through the entrance. Milo stepped onto the porch without hesitation. Silent. Listening. The storm had muted the entire neighborhood. No traffic. No voices. Only wind moving through frozen trees beneath the dark Canadian sky. Then somewhere beneath the silence came another faint underground tremor rolling through the earth. Milo finally barked once. Sharp enough to echo down the empty street. Lights flicked on inside a neighbor's upstairs window. Ethan stared at the Doberman standing rigid beneath the porch light with snow gathering across his dark fur. And for the first time since the failed drills began, the old officer felt something colder than doubt settle quietly into his chest. Recognition. By morning, the storm had buried most of Toronto beneath heavy gray snow and dirty slush pushed against the curbs along Danforth Avenue. Ethan barely slept. Every time the old house creaked in the wind, he found himself listening for the same distant vibration Milo had reacted to all night. The Doberman remained awake beside the living room window until dawn finally washed pale blue light across the neighborhood. Even then, Milo never relaxed. His ears stayed upright. Listening. Ethan drove straight to the veterinary assessment unit near headquarters just after 8. Snowmelt dripped from the cruiser while commuters shuffled through freezing sidewalks wrapped in scarves and winter boots beneath the weak February sunlight. Milo climbed out slowly beside the building entrance. Exhausted again. But the moment a subway train passed somewhere beneath downtown, the Doberman froze in place. His breathing changed instantly. Dr. Vanessa Mercer noticed it before Ethan even spoke. "There," she said quietly while kneeling beside Milo inside the examination room. His pulse just spiked. Warm fluorescent lights reflected softly across stainless steel cabinets while wind rattled against the frosted windows outside. Milo stood perfectly still beside the examination table, eyes fixed on the floor beneath him. Vanessa listened carefully through the stethoscope pressed against his chest. Heart rate is elevated every time low-frequency vibration passes through the structure. Ethan leaned against the counter with tired eyes. Medical issue. Vanessa removed the stethoscope slowly. No signs of infection. No neurological damage. Nothing physically wrong with him. Another faint tremor rolled beneath the building. This time Ethan felt it too. Weak. Rhythmic. Milo stepped backward immediately with a low uneasy growl. Vanessa frowned toward the floor. That was not traffic. Silence settled over the room for several long seconds. Then a radio crackled somewhere beyond the hallway outside. Transit delays. Minor electrical interference near downtown tunnel systems. Ethan noticed the change in Vanessa's expression immediately. What? She hesitated. There have been strange reports all week. What kind of reports? Power fluctuations underground. Signal interruptions. Maintenance complaints near old TTC infrastructure. Milo suddenly walked toward the wall where a large Toronto Transit map hung beneath fluorescent lights. His nose hovered near the downtown rail lines crossing beneath the city core. Lower Bay. Union. King Station. The Doberman's ears twitched sharply. Listening again. Ethan stared at the map. Beneath those colored lines stretched kilometers of buried concrete tunnels older than some neighborhoods above them. Forgotten corridors. Abandoned maintenance routes. Hidden infrastructure most people never thought about. Vanessa lowered her voice carefully. Dogs can detect vibration humans barely notice. Earthquakes. Machinery. Structural movement. Ethan looked down at Milo standing rigid beneath the transit map. You think he is hearing something underground? Another distant vibration rolled faintly through the building. Milo's entire body stiffened. Not fear. Anticipation. The Doberman looked toward Ethan with exhausted eyes that seemed almost desperate now. As if he had spent weeks trying to warn people in a language nobody understood. Then Ethan remembered something suddenly. 8 years ago. A missing officer. A closed tunnel case buried deep inside division archives. And for the first time, the old policeman began wondering if whatever Milo heard beneath Toronto had been there much longer than anyone realized. Freezing rain tapped softly against the narrow basement windows of Archive Room C while downtown Toronto disappeared into a dark blur beyond police headquarters. Ethan sat alone beneath a flickering desk lamp surrounded by dusty storage boxes, old transit reports, and forgotten case files stacked nearly shoulder-high around the room. The smell of damp paper and cold concrete filled the air. Milo rested near the archive door, but the Doberman had not truly relaxed once. Since arriving. His ears remained upright even in silence. Listening. Ethan rubbed tired eyes and opened another faded file folder marked Lower Bay incidents. Most of the reports inside were routine. Trespassing. Electrical faults. Maintenance complaints buried beneath years of paperwork nobody cared about anymore. Then a photograph slipped loose from the folder and landed across the desk beneath the lamp. Ethan froze immediately. Officer Daniel Mercer stared back at him from the old photograph beside a younger police K9 near a downtown subway entrance. 8 years earlier, Mercer vanished underground during an unauthorized tunnel investigation connected to strange nighttime activity beneath Lower Bay Station. Search teams found his flashlight. His radio. His abandoned cruiser near a maintenance entrance. But Mercer himself was never found. Eventually the case faded into silence the way difficult things often do inside large cities. Ethan stared at the photograph while rain whispered softly outside. I remember you, he murmured. Milo slowly stood from the doorway and approached the desk. The Doberman stopped instantly the moment he saw the photograph beneath the desk lamp. Then came the growl. Low. Uneasy. Ethan looked at him carefully. What is it? Milo sniffed once toward the old picture before stepping backward. His body stiffened immediately. Then another vibration rolled faintly through the archive room floor. Metallic. Rhythmic. The filing cabinets rattled softly against the concrete walls. Ethan felt it clearly this time. Not imagination anymore. Somewhere beneath downtown Toronto, heavy machinery was operating underground. Milo barked sharply toward the floor. Ethan looked back at the old case file. Several pages near the back contained transit maintenance complaints filed days before Mercer disappeared. Reports of strange vibrations beneath Lower Bay tunnels between 3 and 4 in the morning. Unauthorized drilling sounds. Brief electrical disruptions across nearby rail infrastructure. Ethan's chest tightened slowly. The same time Milo woke every night. The same underground resonance shaking through the city now. Milo suddenly moved toward the transit map pinned across the archive wall and stopped directly beside one faded route line leading beneath downtown financial districts. Ethan stepped closer. A handwritten note near the old reports caught his attention immediately. Secure transfer corridor maintenance route. Restricted access. He frowned. Certain underground TTC corridors were occasionally used for high-security movement between financial institutions downtown. Cash transfers. Precious materials. Confidential transit routes few people even knew existed. Ethan looked back toward Mercer's photograph beneath. The warm desk lamp glow. Then toward Milo standing rigid beside the map with exhausted eyes fixed on the underground rail lines beneath Toronto. The old officer finally understood why the Doberman sounded afraid every time the city vibrated beneath them. Whatever Mercer discovered 8 years ago had never disappeared. It had only gone quiet underground until somebody started digging again. Freezing rain hammered against the abandoned lower bay entrance while flashing transit lights painted the wet pavement blue and red beneath the storm. Ethan stood beside the chained maintenance gate with one hand gripping the cold metal links as Milo trembled quietly near his boots. The Doberman looked exhausted beyond words now. His breathing came shallow and uneven each time another underground vibration rolled beneath the city streets. Captain Murray finally arrived minutes later wearing a dark winter coat soaked with sleet. "Tell me this is not about the dog hearing ghosts underground," he muttered while approaching the entrance. Ethan handed him the old transit reports from the Mercer case. "Read the timestamps." Murray scanned the pages beneath the weak overhead light. 3:17 in the morning. Unauthorized drilling sounds. Electrical fluctuations beneath lower bay corridors. The captain's expression slowly changed. "These are from 8 years ago. And the same vibrations started again 3 weeks ago." Another metallic impact echoed faintly beneath the pavement below them. Even Murray heard it this time. Milo suddenly collapsed beside the gate. The Doberman lowered himself heavily onto the wet concrete with a weak growl buried deep in his chest. His ears still twitched toward the underground sounds, but his body looked completely drained. Ethan crouched beside him immediately. "Easy, partner." Milo barely reacted. Captain Murray stared down at the exhausted dog. "Calloway, he cannot keep doing this." Rainwater dripped steadily from the rusted fencing while distant subway trains rolled somewhere beneath downtown Toronto. Milo's eyes remained half-closed now, but every few seconds another underground vibration passed through the pavement and his paws trembled against the concrete automatically. Listening even while collapsing from exhaustion. Ethan rested one gloved hand against the side of the Doberman's neck. Warm. Shaking. Fighting to stay alert. Then headlights suddenly swept across the alley again. The same black utility van rolled slowly past the maintenance entrance before stopping farther down the street near a service road leading underground. 3 shadowed figures stepped out carrying long equipment cases. Through the freezing rain. Milo's eyes opened instantly. His ears snapped upright. A low growl rolled through his chest despite the exhaustion weighing down every movement. Ethan stood immediately. "That is them." Captain Murray reached for the radio clipped beneath his jacket. "Tactical units are at least 15 minutes away." The shadowed figures disappeared through the service entrance below street level. Another heavy vibration rolled upward beneath the pavement. Closer now. Deliberate drilling. Ethan looked down at Milo struggling to stay awake beside the gate. The Doberman's eyes kept drifting shut between each tremor as if his body could not carry the strain any longer. Murray exhaled heavily through the freezing rain and shook his head. "Wake him up before it is too late." The sentence hung beneath the storm like something final. Ethan slowly placed both hands along Milo's shoulders. "Hey," he whispered softly. "Wake up, partner." For one terrifying second, nothing happened. Then Milo's eyes snapped fully open. Every trace of exhaustion vanished behind pure focus. The Doberman surged upright with a sharp bark that echoed across the empty street. His ears locked toward the underground entrance while rain streamed across his dark fur beneath the flashing transit lights. Another metallic strike thundered faintly from below ground. Milo lunged toward the gate hard enough to rattle the chains violently. And this time, everyone understood. The dog had not been sleeping through the danger. He had been carrying the warning alone. Captain Murray unlocked the maintenance gate with shaking hands while freezing rain hissed softly through the alley behind them. The heavy chain fell against the concrete with a metallic echo that disappeared into the darkness below street level. Milo moved first. The Doberman descended the narrow tunnel stairs without hesitation, ears upright, body tense, nose low to the wet ground. Ethan followed close behind with flashlight raised while Murray stayed several steps back speaking quietly into the radio for emergency support. The deeper they moved underground, the quieter Toronto became above them. Traffic vanished. Wind disappeared. Only distant dripping water and the steady vibration of machinery remained somewhere ahead in the tunnel network. Flashlight beams swept across old TTC signs faded by decades of moisture and dust. Rust-covered abandoned rails stretching through maintenance corridors beneath the city. Every few meters, Milo paused briefly. Listening. Then moving again. Like he already knew exactly where the sounds were coming. From. Ethan noticed something else too. The farther underground they went, the more exhausted the Doberman became. Milo's breathing sharpened with every vibration passing through the concrete walls around them. Yet he never stopped walking. Finally, the narrow corridor opened into a larger underground junction lined with utility pipes and electrical conduit systems. Ethan immediately killed his flashlight beam and motioned for silence. Voices echoed faintly somewhere ahead. Low. Focused. Professional. Then came the sound of drilling equipment shutting down abruptly. Milo growled quietly beside Ethan's leg. Through a narrow opening between concrete pillars, Ethan finally saw them. 3 men wearing dark utility jackets stood beside industrial equipment near a reinforced transit wall marked with restricted access warnings. Portable generators hummed softly beside stacks of cutting tools and tunnel schematics spread across folding tables. One wall section had already been partially breached. Behind it ran the secured transfer corridor hidden beneath Toronto's financial district. Ethan's pulse tightened immediately. "Dear God," Murray whispered behind him. The operation was far larger than simple vandalism. These men had maps. Timetables. Access routes. Ethan spotted one transit schedule pinned beside the drilling equipment. Monday morning. Secure underground transfer window. Milo suddenly stiffened hard beside him. Another vibration rolled through the tunnel. Different this time. Stronger. One of the criminals cursed immediately. "The support wall is shifting again." Another answered sharply. "We finish tonight or we lose the route." Ethan exchanged a glance with Murray. They were destabilizing the old tunnel structure, trying to reach the transfer corridor before the scheduled financial transport arrived. Milo barked once without warning. Sharp enough to echo through the junction. Silence exploded underground. Flashlights snapped toward the corridor instantly. "Police," someone shouted. The suspects scattered immediately through separate maintenance passages while equipment clattered against the concrete floor. Ethan moved forward fast with Milo beside him. The Doberman lunged toward the damaged wall, barking furiously now. Cracks spread visibly across sections of aging concrete near the drilling site. Small pieces of debris skipped across the rails beneath their feet. Murray grabbed Ethan's shoulder hard. "The tunnel is becoming unstable." Another deep metallic groan rolled through the underground corridor. Dust drifted slowly from the ceiling pipes overhead. Milo stood directly between Ethan and the damaged breach point with his ears locked toward the shaking wall. Exhausted. Trembling. Still warning them. And suddenly Ethan understood the terrible truth completely. Officer Daniel Mercer had not disappeared because he got lost underground 8 years ago. He died trying to stop the exact same robbery before the city buried the case beneath silence and concrete. The underground junction trembled again beneath Lower Bay Station while dust drifted softly from cracked concrete overhead. Emergency lights from the drilling equipment painted the tunnel walls in weak red flashes as abandoned generators hummed beside the partially breached transfer corridor. Ethan moved carefully through the unstable junction with Milo close against his leg while Captain Murray called tactical updates through the radio behind them. Somewhere deeper underground, the fleeing suspects slammed metal doors shut as they disappeared through the maintenance tunnels. Milo stopped suddenly beside the damaged wall. The Doberman lowered his head toward the fractured concrete and released a low, uneasy growl. Ethan followed the direction of his stare. Fresh cracks spread slowly across the old support structure surrounding the breach point. Tiny fragments of cement skipped across the rails beneath their boots every few seconds. "The drilling weakened the support columns," Murray said quietly. Another deep vibration rolled through the junction immediately after he spoke. Louder this time. The old tunnel groaned around them like a ship under pressure. Milo barked sharply and backed away from the damaged corridor. Ethan trusted the reaction instantly. "Move back." The 3 of them retreated several meters down the maintenance passage just as part of the concrete wall split with a violent cracking sound that echoed through the underground system. One floodlight crashed sideways onto the tracks, throwing sparks across wet steel rails before dying completely. Steam hissed from a ruptured pipe somewhere overhead. Murray stared toward the damaged breach with pale eyes. Mercer walked into this alone 8 years ago. Ethan looked down at Milo standing rigid beside him despite exhaustion shaking through the Doberman's body. And nobody listened to the warning signs afterward. Another radio transmission crackled through the tunnel. Tactical teams were sealing street exits above ground. Transit control had already stopped overnight service through several downtown lines to prevent structural risk. But the suspects were still somewhere underground. Milo suddenly pulled hard toward a narrow eastern maintenance corridor branching away from the breached wall. Ethan raised his flashlight immediately. Fresh muddy footprints stretched through shallow water along the tracks. One suspect had separated from the others during the escape. "This way," Ethan whispered. The corridor narrowed deeper. Underground until the city above felt impossibly far away. Pipes lined the ceiling. Water dripped steadily into dark puddles beside old electrical conduits. Milo moved slower now. Exhaustion dragged visibly at every step, yet the Doberman kept listening between each breath. Then they heard it. A metal toolbox falling somewhere ahead, followed by hurried footsteps against concrete. Ethan killed the flashlight beam instantly. Silence swallowed the corridor except for the distant hum of failing generators behind them. Another vibration rolled beneath the floor. Milo stopped completely. His ears lifted high toward the ceiling pipes overhead. Ethan looked up just as dust began drifting downward through the darkness. The tunnel structure here was weaker than the main junction. One more heavy collapse could trap everyone underground. Then a shadow moved suddenly near the far maintenance door ahead. One of the suspects. The man froze when he spotted Ethan and the Doberman emerging through the darkness. Fear spread across his face immediately. Milo growled low but did not attack. The Doberman only stood there trembling beneath the weak emergency lighting, exhausted eyes fixed on the unstable tunnel around them. Ethan slowly raised one hand. "Do not run." Another deep groan echoed through the corridor walls before the suspect could answer. The entire underground passage shifted beneath their feet. And suddenly everybody underground understood the same terrifying truth at the exact same moment. The tunnel was beginning to collapse. The underground corridor groaned like a living thing beneath downtown Toronto while dust poured steadily from the cracked ceiling pipes overhead. Emergency lights flickered weakly through the darkness, painting the narrow maintenance tunnel in flashes of red and pale white. Ethan stood frozen beside the suspect near the maintenance door while Milo stared upward with every muscle in his exhausted body pulled tight. The Doberman barked sharply once. Warning. Another violent tremor rolled beneath the corridor immediately after. The concrete floor shifted hard enough to send loose tools sliding through shallow water along the rails. The suspect looked toward the shaking tunnel with panic spreading across his face. "The supports are failing," he whispered. Ethan grabbed the man's jacket immediately. "Move." They started back through the corridor fast while Captain Murray guided emergency crews closer through the radio. But Milo suddenly stopped halfway down the tunnel. The Doberman planted himself firmly against the wet concrete floor, ears upright, growling low toward the ceiling overhead. Ethan turned instinctively. A long fracture spread slowly across one of the old support beams near the corridor entrance. Fine dust drifted downward into the flashlight beam like falling snow. "Milo," Ethan called sharply. The Doberman did not move. Another deep cracking sound echoed through the tunnel walls. Then everything happened at once. A heavy section of concrete conduit broke loose overhead and crashed downward directly toward Ethan. Milo lunged instantly. The exhausted Doberman slammed hard against Ethan's leg with enough force to throw the old officer sideways into the tunnel wall just before the conduit shattered across the ground where he had been standing seconds earlier. Sparks burst across the flooded rails while steam hissed violently from ruptured pipes above them. Ethan hit the concrete shoulder first, stunned by the impact. The suspect stumbled backward in shock. Milo collapsed near the fallen conduit, breathing hard. Too hard. Dust filled the corridor around them while the entire underground structure groaned beneath the pressure of failing supports. "Everybody move now," Murray shouted through the radio somewhere behind them. Ethan pushed himself upright immediately and rushed toward the Doberman. Milo tried to stand but his legs trembled violently beneath him. Weeks of exhaustion had finally caught up with him underground beneath the city he had been trying to protect. Ethan crouched beside him despite debris continuing to fall around them. "Come on, partner." Milo looked up at him with tired eyes still fixed toward the unstable tunnel behind them. "Listening even now." Then another crack split through the corridor wall farther back near the breached transfer route. The suspect stared toward the collapse zone in horror. We did not mean for this to happen. Ethan looked at him coldly while helping Milo back onto trembling legs. Mercer probably heard the same thing before he died down here. Silence hit the corridor harder than the collapse itself. Nobody answered. Because deep underground beneath Toronto, surrounded by broken concrete and failing tunnel walls, everyone finally understood what Officer Daniel Mercer had discovered 8 years earlier. The robbery was never just theft. It was desperation powerful enough to bury an entire city underground if nobody stopped it in time. Milo leaned heavily against Ethan's side while emergency lights flickered weakly through the dust-filled tunnel. Exhausted. Shaking. Loyal beyond reason. And as the old officer guided the Doberman slowly toward the surface, he realized the dog had spent weeks carrying fear no human being could have survived alone. By dawn, freezing rain had turned most of downtown Toronto into silver reflections and dirty slush beneath flashing emergency lights. Police vehicles blocked several streets surrounding the lower bay maintenance entrances while transit officials and structural engineers moved quickly through the storm with radios pressed against winter coats. Above ground, commuters barely noticed the disruption. A few subway delays. Temporary closures. Nothing more. The city kept moving. It always did. But deep beneath the financial district, the underground robbery that had taken months to prepare was already finished before it ever began. Ethan sat in the back of an emergency response vehicle with Milo lying across a thick thermal blanket beside him. The Doberman finally looked still for the first time in weeks. Not asleep yet. Just exhausted beyond movement. Rain tapped softly against the vehicle roof while paramedics checked minor injuries from the tunnel collapse farther underground. Captain Murray stepped inside carrying a soaked evidence folder beneath one arm. Tactical units caught the remaining suspects near the eastern maintenance exits, he said quietly. Ethan nodded once. The transfer route. Secure. Murray lowered himself onto the bench across from them. Financial transport was scheduled for Monday morning exactly where Mercer predicted 8 years ago. Silence settled heavily inside the vehicle. Milo lifted his head slightly at the sound of the old officer's name. Ethan rested one hand gently along the Doberman's shoulder. Mercer died trying to stop this operation before anyone understood what it was. Murray looked toward the rain-streaked window. And then the city buried it because nobody wanted panic connected to underground financial routes. Another ambulance passed outside beneath flashing lights reflected across wet pavement. Ethan thought about the old case files sitting forgotten inside Archive Room C for nearly a decade. Unauthorized vibrations. Tunnel reports. Missing evidence. A dead officer reduced to paperwork nobody wanted reopened. Milo had somehow heard the danger returning before any human being connected the pieces again. The Doberman's ears twitched faintly as another distant subway train rolled beneath the city somewhere far away. Ethan noticed immediately. Even now, Milo was still listening. Dr. Vanessa Mercer arrived shortly after sunrise wearing a dark winter coat damp from the storm. The moment she saw the exhausted Doberman, her expression softened. He pushed himself far beyond normal limits, she said quietly after examining him beneath the emergency lights. Ethan looked down at Milo lying motionless beside the thermal blanket. Will he recover? Vanessa hesitated before answering. Yes. But not if he keeps carrying an entire city underground by himself. Outside the response vehicle, the storm slowly began fading over Toronto. Snow mixed with rain across the empty streets while emergency crews sealed the damaged tunnel entrances below. The robbery route would never open. The transfer corridor remained secure. And most people would never know how close everything came to collapsing beneath their feet. Ethan looked toward Milo again. The Doberman's eyes were finally beginning to close naturally instead of from exhaustion. No trembling now. No restless listening. Just silence. Warm. Safe. The old officer leaned back slowly against the ambulance wall while morning light spread pale gold through the rain outside. And somewhere beneath the noise of radios, traffic, and distant trains moving through Toronto, Ethan realized the city itself sounded quieter now. As if one buried secret had finally stopped screaming underground. March arrived slowly across Toronto after the storm. Snowbanks along the sidewalks melted into shallow streams beside the roads while pale sunlight reflected from office towers above the downtown core. The damaged tunnel sections beneath Lower Bay remained sealed behind heavy security barriers now. Transit crews worked quietly underground every night repairing weakened structures while most citizens passed through the city completely unaware of how close disaster had come beneath their feet. Ethan visited Milo every evening after work. The Doberman rested inside the K9 recovery wing near headquarters where warm lights and soft ventilation replaced sirens and underground vibrations. Dr. Vanessa Mercer insisted on complete operational leave until further notice. His nervous system has been overloaded for weeks, she explained one evening while reviewing medical scans beneath the glow of her office monitor. Most working dogs would have collapsed much sooner. Ethan looked through the observation window where Milo slept quietly on a thick gray blanket for the first time in what felt like months. No twitching paws now. No restless ears lifting toward invisible sounds beneath the floor. Just sleep. Real sleep. Vanessa folded her arms softly across her chest. Some dogs can detect frequencies humans never notice. Structural vibrations. Electrical resonance. Deep mechanical movement underground. Ethan nodded slowly. He heard the drilling before anyone else did. Not just the drilling, she corrected gently. The stress inside the tunnel system itself. Silence settled across the office while snowmelt dripped softly outside the windows. Ethan stared at Milo resting beneath the warm lights. Everybody thought he was failing. Vanessa looked toward the sleeping Doberman with sad eyes. The same ability that made him exceptional nearly destroyed him. Ethan remembered the training yard again. Milo trembling beneath the sirens while everyone around him believed he had become weak. But the Doberman had never been afraid of the noise above ground. He had been listening to something buried far below it. Several days later, Captain Murray quietly reopened Officer Daniel Mercer's case file. Tunnel evidence recovered from the failed robbery finally confirmed what Mercer discovered 8 years earlier before disappearing underground. The city would never release most details publicly. Certain financial corridors beneath Toronto were meant to stay invisible. But Mercer's name was no longer buried inside forgotten archives. A small memorial photograph appeared near division headquarters beside the K9 unit entrance. Ethan stopped there one morning before sunrise with coffee warming his hands. Milo stood quietly beside him on a short leash, stronger now but slower than before. The Doberman stared up at the old photograph beneath the hallway lights for several silent seconds. Then he lowered himself gently onto the floor beneath it. Ethan exhaled softly through the quiet hallway. You heard him too, did you not? Milo rested his head against Ethan's boot without moving. Outside, early morning streetcars rattled through the city while commuters filled the sidewalks beneath the cold Canadian sky. Toronto sounded ordinary again. Safe again. But Ethan understood something now that most people never would. Cities carried memories underground long after humans forgot them. Sometimes through cracked tunnels. Sometimes through old case files. And sometimes through a tired Doberman who spent weeks listening to danger no one else believed was there. By late April, winter had finally loosened its grip on Ontario. The snow disappeared from the sidewalks around Toronto, replaced by cold rain, pale sunlight, and the smell of wet cedar drifting through open windows across the city. Streetcars rattled through downtown intersections again while people hurried beneath office towers carrying coffee cups and umbrellas, unaware that only months earlier the ground beneath them had nearly collapsed under the weight of buried secrets. Ethan drove north that weekend with Milo resting quietly across the back seat of the truck. No police radio. No tactical gear. Just endless stretches of highway cutting through pine forests and thawing farmland beneath a soft gray sky. The farther they moved away from Toronto, the calmer the Doberman became. His breathing slowed naturally now. No sudden tension. No restless ears searching for vibrations beneath the floorboards. Near Lake Simcoe, Ethan pulled onto a narrow gravel road leading toward an old lakeside cabin he used years ago after difficult cases. Wind moved gently through the trees while small waves rolled against the shoreline carrying the cold clean scent of northern water and spring earth. Milo stepped slowly from the truck and stood motionless beside the lake. The Doberman listened for several long seconds out of habit. Ethan watched carefully from nearby. Nothing came. No underground machinery. No tunnel vibrations. No buried warnings hidden beneath concrete and steel. Only wind. Water. Silence. The old officer sat on the weathered wooden dock while evening sunlight spread gold across the lake. Milo eventually lowered himself beside him with a tired sigh, resting against Ethan's leg the way he used to before the sleepless weeks began. Somewhere far overhead, geese crossed the sky heading north beyond the pine trees. Ethan reached down slowly and brushed one hand along the Doberman's neck. "You can rest now," he whispered. Milo closed his eyes almost immediately. Not from exhaustion this time. Peace. The kind that only arrives after surviving something too heavy to explain. Ethan stared quietly across the lake while soft ripples moved beneath the fading sunset. He thought about Daniel Mercer. About forgotten tunnels beneath Toronto. About all the nights Milo stood awake at the window listening to danger buried beneath millions of people who never knew it existed. Cities forgot things easily. Dogs did not. That realization stayed with Ethan longer than any official report ever would. The evening grew colder as the sun disappeared beyond the trees. Milo never moved from beside him. The Doberman remained asleep against the dock beneath the sound of water touching the shoreline in slow gentle rhythm. No trembling paws. No warning growls. No fear hidden behind exhausted eyes anymore. Just stillness. Real stillness. Ethan leaned back quietly and listened to the silence surrounding the lake. Somewhere far south, trains still moved beneath Toronto through tunnels repaired and reinforced after the failed robbery. The city continued forward the way cities always do. But here, beneath the darkening Canadian sky beside calm northern water, none of it could reach them anymore. And for the first time in a very long while, nothing beneath the world was calling Milo to stay awake.